This is the Wikipedia page for spring season. Welcome to WikiListen, the podcast where we read Wikipedia pages and provide commentary. I'm Victor Varnado, KSN.
And I'm Rachel Teichman, LMSW. Happy spring.
Spring, here we come. Everybody's out there and we all want some. That's a poem that I just made for everybody for spring. Let's get started. Spring, also known as springtime, is one of the 4 temperate seasons succeeding winter and preceding summer. There are various technical definitions of spring, but local usage of the term varies according to local climate, cultures, and customs. When it is spring in the northern hemisphere, it is autumn in the southern hemisphere, and vice versa. At the spring or vernal equinox days and nights are approximately 12 hours long, with daytime length increasing and nighttime length decreasing as the season progresses.
Spring and springtime refer to the season and also to ideas of rebirth, rejuvenation, renewal, resurrection, and regrowth. Subtropical and tropical areas have climates better described in terms of other seasons, e.g. dry or wet, monsoonal or cyclonic. Cultures may have local names for seasons which have little equivalence to the terms originating in Europe.
Meteorological reckoning. Further information, meteorological seasons. Meteorologists generally define 4 seasons in many climatic areas: spring, summer, autumn, fall, and winter. These are determined by the value of their average temperatures on a monthly basis, with each season lasting 3 months. The 3 warmest months are by definition summer, the 3 coldest months are winter, and the intervening gaps are spring and autumn. Meteorological spring can therefore start on different dates in different regions.
In the US and UK, spring months are March, April, and May.
In Australia and New Zealand, spring begins on 1 September and ends on 30 November.
In Ireland, following the Gaelic calendar, spring is often defined as February, March, and April.
In Sweden, meteorologists define the beginning of spring as the first occasion on which the average 24 hours temperature exceeds 0 degrees Celsius for 7 consecutive days. Thus, the date varies with latitude and elevation.
That seems reasonable.
Does it, or does it seem like too much?
No, to me that seems reasonable.
To me, it seems like too much.
You want to fight?
Yes.
Bring it. In Brazil, spring months are September, October, and November.
Astronomical and solar reckoning. In the Northern Hemisphere, e.g. Germany, the United States, Canada, and the UK, the astronomical vernal equinox, varying between 19 and 21 March, can be taken to mark the first day of spring, with the summer solstice around 21 June. Marked as first day of summer. Everyone, this is how they're writing dates. I'm just reading it as it's written. I know it sounds like I'm saying dates in a crazy way, but that's the way they're written. By solar reckoning, spring is held to begin 1 February until the first day of summer on May Day, with the summer solstice being marked as midsummer instead of the beginning of summer as with astronomical reckoning.
In Persian culture, the first day of spring is the first day of the month, called Farvardin, which begins on 20 or 21 March.
Happy Farvardin, everybody!
Happy Farvardin!
In the traditional Chinese calendar, the spring season consists of the days between Lichun, 3 to 5 February, taking Chunfin, 20 to 22 March, as its midpoint, then ending at Lixia, 5 to 7 May. Similarly, according to the Celtic tradition, which is based solely on daylight and the strength of the noon sun, spring begins in early February near Imbolc or Candlemas and continues until early May, Beltane.
The spring season in India is culturally in the months of March and April, with an average temperature of approximately 32 degrees Celsius. Some people in India, especially from Karnataka state, celebrate their new year in spring, Ugadi.
Ecological reckoning. The beginning of spring is not always determined by fixed calendar dates. The phenological or ecological definition of spring relates to biological indicators such as the blossoming of a range of plant species, the activities of animals, and the special smell of soil that has reached the temperature for microflora to flourish. These indicators, along with the beginning of spring, vary according to the local climate and according to the specific weather of a particular year.
Some ecologists divide the year into 6 seasons. In addition to spring, ecological reckoning identifies an earlier separate pre-vernal, early or pre-spring season between the hibernal winter and vernal spring seasons. This is a time when only the hardiest flowers like the crocus are in bloom, sometimes while there is still some snow cover on the ground.
Natural events. During early spring, the axis of the Earth is increasing its tilt relative to the sun, and the length of daylight rapidly increases for the relevant hemisphere. The hemisphere begins to warm significantly, causing new plant growth to, quote, spring forth, giving the season its name.
Any snow begins to melt, swelling streams with runoff, and any frosts become less severe. In climates that have no snow and rare frosts, air and ground temperature increase more rapidly.
Many flowering plants bloom at this time of year in a long succession, sometimes beginning when snow is still on the ground and continuing into early summer. In normally snowless areas, quote, spring may begin as early as February, Northern Hemisphere, or August in the Southern Hemisphere, heralded by the blooming of deciduous magnolias, cherries, and quince. Many temperate areas have a dry spring and wet autumn, fall, which brings about flowering in this season more consistent with the need for water as well as warmth. Subarctic areas may not experience, quote, spring at all until May.
While spring is a result of the warmth caused by the changing orientation of the Earth's axis relative to the sun, the weather in many parts of the world is affected by other less predictable events. The rainfall in spring, or any season, follows trends more related to longer cycles, such as the solar cycle, or events created by ocean currents and ocean temperatures, for example, the El Niño effect and the Southern Oscillation Index.
Unstable spring weather may occur more often when warm air begins to invade from lower latitudes, while cold air is still pushing from the polar regions. Flooding is also most common in and near mountainous areas during this time of year because of snowmelt, which is accelerated by warm rains in North America. Tornado Alley is most active at this time of year, especially since the Rocky Mountains prevent the surging hot and cold air masses from spreading eastward and instead force them into direct conflict. Besides tornadoes, supercell thunderstorms can also produce dangerously large hail and very high winds, for which a severe thunderstorm warning or tornado warning is usually issued. Even more so than in winter, the jet streams play an important role in unstable and severe northern hemisphere weather in springtime.
In recent decades, season creep has been observed, which means that many phenological signs of spring are occurring earlier in many regions by around 2 days per decade.
Spring in the southern hemisphere is different in several significant ways to that of the northern hemisphere for several reasons, including
1. There is no land bridge between southern hemisphere countries and the Antarctic zone capable of bringing in cold air without the temperature mitigating effects of extensive tracts of water.
2. The vastly greater amount of ocean in the southern hemisphere at most latitudes.
3. At this time in Earth's geologic history, the Earth has an orbit which brings it in closer to the sun in the southern hemisphere for its warmer seasons.
4. There is a circumpolar flow of air, the roaring 40s and 50s, uninterrupted by large land masses.
5. No equivalent jet streams. And
6. The peculiarities of the reversing ocean currents in the Pacific.
cultural associations. Carnival. Carnival is practiced by many Christians around the world in the days before Lent, 40 days without Sundays before Easter. It is the first spring festival of the new year for many. I did not know that was a Christian thing.
Well, congratulations. WikiListen has taught you something.
Thank you.
Easter. Easter is the most important religious feast in the Christian liturgical year. Christians believe that Jesus was resurrected from the dead on the, quote, third day, 2 days after his crucifixion, and celebrate his resurrection on Easter Day, 2 days after Good Friday. Since the Last Supper was a Passover Seder, the date of Easter can be calculated as the first Sunday after the start of Passover. This is usually, see Passover below, the first Sunday after the first full moon following the spring equinox. The date of Easter varies between 22 March and 25 April, which corresponds to between 4 April and 8 May in the Gregorian calendar for the Eastern and Oriental Orthodox churches using the Julian calendar. In this celebration, the children do an Easter egg hunt.
May Day. The 1st of May is the date of many public holidays. In many countries, May Day is synonymous with International Workers' Day or Labor Day, which celebrates the social and economic achievements of the labor movement. As a day of celebration, the holiday has ancient origins, and it can relate to many customs that have survived into modern times. Many of these customs are due to May Day being a cross-quarter day, meaning that in the Northern Hemisphere, where it is almost exclusively celebrated, it falls approximately halfway between the spring equinox and summer solstice. In the Celtic tradition, this date marked the end of spring and the beginning of summer.
Passover. The Passover begins on the 15th day of the month of Nisan, which typically falls in March or April of the Gregorian calendar, on the night of a full moon after the northern spring equinox. However, due to leap months falling after the vernal equinox, Passover sometimes starts on the second full moon after vernal equinox, as in 2016. Now, I do know I said equinox and equinox, but we're going to have to live with that, everybody. I'm a wild card. Hey, there's a part about you. Jews celebrate this holiday to commemorate their escape from slavery in Egypt, as described in the book of Exodus in the Torah. Foods consumed during Passover seders, such as lamb and barley, are tied to springtime seasonal availability. In this celebration, children recite the 4 questions during the seder and hunt for the
Afikomen.
And hunt for the afikomen afterwards. What is an afikomen?
The afikomen is usually like a piece of matzah that one of the grown-ups wraps up or not and then hides it. And then the kids have to try and find it. And typically the winner, depending on the family, will get either money, or in my family, you get jelly fruit slices.
So it says here that afikomen is a word originally having the connotation of refreshments eaten after the meal. It is now almost strictly associated with the half piece of matzah, which is broken in two during the early stage of the Passover Seder and set aside to be eaten as a dessert afterwards. And it looks like there's a hand holding a giant honeycomb-looking thing, which I've never snever seen before.
It's a round piece of matzah. It looks like it might be homemade matzah, actually, which I've never had it homemade.
Well, you learn something every day at WikiListen.
All Hallowtide, the Western Christian season encompassing the trinum of All Saints' Eve, Halloween, All Saints' Day, All Hallows, and All Souls' Day are observed in the spring in the Southern Hemisphere.
I've never ever heard of All Hallowtide.
Me neither.
And that's a thing? All Hallowtide, the Western Christian season. That's brand new to me. Interesting. All right. Well, there you have it, everybody. If you were wondering what spring brings you, it brings you joy, it brings you flowers, it brings you all Hallowtide.
Passover is my favorite holiday.
This has been the Wikipedia page for spring season.
Thanks for listening to WikiListen. You can find us at wikilisten.com and on all social media at WikiListen, except for Twitter, which is at wiki_listen.
If there's a particular page that you'd like us to read, please let us know.